Hey, what up everyone? Anthony Fantano here, internet's busiest music nerd. It's super snowy outside. It's a blizzard out there. It's a blizzard. Maybe it's a blizzard for you today too. You're chilling inside. You want to know what to do? I know what you can do. God, my neck hurts. Oh, my neck fucking hurts. I know what you can do. Check out this podcast over here. Check out this podcast. It's about the politics of think pieces and reviews featuring two pretty great writers from the Tiny Mixtapes crew. Check out their website, that think piece and everything. More information is linked down there in the description. Now, if you want to support this podcast, help this podcast out, there are a few ways you can do it. You can hit up our Amazon Associates link down there in the description. Buy anything on Amazon if you live in the US. We get kickback from it doing your general Amazon shopping, stuff you were going to buy anyway. Help out TND using that link. Again, it's down there in the description. You can also be up to date with this podcast, with it getting sent to your email inbox. Okay, downloads straight to your email inbox, brand new episodes for a small monthly fee in the support page of our website. That is also linked down below. You can also pick up a classic review over there. We might have shirts or other merch. And finally, you can share this review with your friends, like it, put it out there on social media, watch it on YouTube, and we have older episodes backlogged if you want to download and listen to older episodes of this podcast. Not only is the playlist of other podcasts on this YouTube channel, that's linked down there in the description box, but we also have this up on iTunes. So if you want to subscribe over there, keep up to date using that. We do, like I said, put the older episodes over there, backlog the older episodes there, and that's about it. Thanks for watching. Podcast is coming. You the best forever. Hey everyone, Anthony Fantano here, internet's busiest music nerd. You're listening to a new episode of the Needle Drop Podcast. And in this episode, we're going to be discussing a pretty important topic to me and maybe a lot of you, given that you watch so many of my reviews: music writing, think pieces in the modern age, especially in relation to the modern political landscape, the social justice landscape. There's a fantastic piece on the Tiny Mixtapes website right now, written by writers Pat Beane and SCVSCV. It's a 2015 Identity Crisis. That's the title of it, correct, guys?
Yes.
Yes. And we're going to be discussing this article. I have linked it down there in the description box. I've also linked Nick and Pat's respective Twitter accounts and their writer profiles on Tiny Mixtapes. I definitely recommend that you check the piece out. We're going to be talking about the albums that they bring up and just kind of music and writing that takes more of a social slant in this episode. Guys, thanks for coming on.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks for having us.
You guys opened the whole piece up with a pretty bold statement. The idea that music criticism is hopeless. And I'm just kind of wondering if you would explain on that a little bit further. I mean, is the situation as dire as you sort of seem to portray it?
Well, I think it's that might be a little bit harsh, because ultimately in the end of the piece, we argue that it's essential. So we're saying that it's hopeless is true in a way, and I think we kind of go through that a bit in the piece, but ultimately, hopefully we're like affirming that it's essential at the same time with it. I don't know, what do you think, Pat?
Yeah, I know it's, essential to the entire, process of listening at this point. I guess hopeless to me in that sense just means more there's not necessarily like an aspirational bent to discussing music, and that politics have kind of infiltrated music writing, music criticism.
So the issue to you is sort of people aren't reviewing music for the sake of reviewing music and sharing in that experience. It's like they're just kind of partaking in the act of reviewing music to some other end. Yeah,
and I guess our primary point were that the end, ultimately, what we're seeing more and more of, that end is an economic end. It's an attention-grabbing end. It's something that's desiring a clarity in music that doesn't really exist, maybe. It's wanting to kind of say what music is for people as opposed to saying what the music is with the actual music in conversation with the music.
And that's sort of a criticism that you guys bring up, the idea that music criticism exists for the purpose of kind of explaining the art to the listener, speaking on behalf of the art. Is that something that, though, you think is kind of a baseline characteristic, a necessity for music criticism, though? Or is that something that music writers should be trying to evolve past or just move beyond? Like that's the littlest you should be doing as a music writer. You should be more ambitious, trying to do more.
I think, a huge amount of music criticism's readership is looking for just descriptions of music, and like insights into, sound, just like things to latch onto. But earlier when I said that politics has infiltrated music writing, I guess that's a little bit misleading because, music exists within the political, like, no matter what, it's always already there. So I think music writing should reflect that, but not only to those ends. So yeah, it should evolve beyond just description.
Yeah.
And what exactly should music writers be trying to incorporate into their reviews other than just kind of simply descriptions of what's going on in the music? I think it's essential to add other things, maybe your emotional take on it or something like that. But I think as people sort of look at something as social and cultural as music, it's kind of tempting to throw whatever album they're reviewing into the context of whatever's going on currently in the political sphere or in the social sphere.
Yeah, and I think that what is essential for music criticism is a self-criticism as well, and an acknowledgement of music criticism's inherent subjectivity, which I think is what think pieces, or what a lot of kind of more recent music criticism has not considered, is that the fact that it is a kind of subjective experience of one mind listening to this music. And I think that allows to give room for more emotional takes, more like experiential takes regarding that music. You're allowed to get away with more interesting kind of insights to it because it's your personal insights with it, and other people can either agree or disagree or share in your kind of like value production of that music. But I guess what we were critiquing with this piece is what is making off to be an objective kind of statement about whatever moment is happening, and to encapsulate that moment and not necessarily consider the more subtle interactions that are at play, I guess.
Are you saying that there's kind of this rampant illusion of objectivity going on right now that either the readers are putting on to the music criticism and the think pieces, or is it that the writers are going into it assuming that everything that they're saying is sort of doctrine in a way? I agree with you that music criticism is a very subjective thing, and it's that subjectivity that I don't think it can ever get rid of. And if you were to do a completely objective review, I don't think the audience would truly want that anyway, since it would just kind of be very bland, plain descriptions of whatever you're listening to, as accurate as possible. I think the listeners are kind of looking for a description of the emotional experience of the record, and that's incredibly subjective. So while that's something, that subjectivity is never going to go away as long as there's at least some kind of entertainment or quality level to reviews, and we don't go so hard line to the objectivity direction. I think writers should at least strive to attain at least some level of objectivity. It's kind of like a bit of a pipe dream, a level of perfection that's never going to be there. If it was attained, it would probably ruin the art form on the whole. But I think it's something that should at least be considered and always be in the back of your mind as you're writing something.
I think a sort of disassociative critical objectivity is impossible. And I'd be remiss to say that it should be striven for it all. Like some of my favorite music reviews are prayers, The one by Max Power. In particular, his Sufjan review is beautiful.
Yeah, and I like to think I definitely have come across other music writers who have completely given up on any sense of kind of objective or speaking for the work. Half the time I've seen some reviews that don't even mention anything about the music. It's just some insane kind of like gone experience that somebody had with the music. And but I guess what I was saying earlier about like that objectivity element, I think it's more of a lack of self-criticism, of like maybe a sense of fallibility in criticism, or that's happening specifically with think pieces, is that maybe they're not, I mean, it's obvious that they're not attempting to be objective per se, because the opinionated nature of it is kind of assumed if you're reading a think piece. It's editorial, there's someone speaking their opinion, it's assumed to be a subjective take. But I guess like the publishing cycle of these things and the kind of like historical kind of proliferation of them, like every moment has to have one of these things being published. I think that gives it an almost historical drive to seem objective, even if it's not in its voice. It just seems that these things are just telling us what culture is, what it's doing at all moments. And it's not self-critical enough to allow for a space for us to question the potential nuance of those moments, I guess.
So is it that, I guess, is the issue that culture and sort of a certain political slant and ideology is being inserted into music reviews, or is it that it's not being inserted into it well or in an objective or a tasteful way? Because I noticed there aren't a whole lot of, I guess, sort of, blatant examples sort of thrown into the piece of specific reviews, and maybe it's just kind of for lack of want to, rattle any cages or just kind of rock the boat or anything like that. But
yeah.
I could think specifically of since we're on this subject already, there was that Run the Jewels review of Run the Jewels 2 that Tiny Mixtapes had put up that basically just kind of threw the album into a corner and just completely categorized it as sexist and really didn't explore it any further than that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, that I don't necessarily have a problem with someone wanting to insert like political or cultural context into music writing, and if that's all that someone does, I mean, yeah, it is limiting to an extent, maybe. But at the same time, I guess like the piece is describing like how that is essential to do. I think that especially music is coming out of those political circumstances. And a lot of the music that we talked about in the piece certainly does. And it's kind of mired or responding to or involved in those contexts. But I guess the issue that we had was when pieces kind of try and say what exactly that is for the music, and kind of like haphazardly or sloppily create an opinion for the music and ultimately misrepresent the music, or at least the fragmented qualities of the music.
Yeah, I suppose that can be an issue. I've read tons of opinions about records that obviously take some kind of political slant or make a social comment or some of some kind, and it seems the more popular the record is, the more chances there are for that message to be kind of either misconstrued or misunderstood or misrepresented in some kind of major way. Certainly the biggest example of that this past year was definitely Kendrick Lamar's latest record, an album that people either sort of saw it as this record that limp-wristed white liberals enjoyed because it made them feel good that they were listening to, I don't know, some black person's experience, or there was kind of this response from the other side of the fence where I saw people kind of charging the record with this claim that it's not political or controversial enough, since it's not pissing anyone off or making some kind of big grand statement. And for me, I mean, I think it's so rare that we get an album that's so popular and is making at least a couple political statements. And I feel like some listeners sort of took the few moments where it felt like a strong social statement was being made and carried it onto the rest of the tracks, which were really more personal in tone and weren't trying to, sort of take it to the man or anything like that. So as a result, I think, as albums that take certain stances get more popular, inevitably there's going to be these kinds of misunderstandings and horrible reviews as well that are just completely misrepresentative of what went on the record in terms of its message.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's going to be an impulse to like have a reactivist or like highly like sensationalized political take on an album that huge, and especially when it is explicitly dealing with, I mean, very immediate like problems in our in the United States. But I think it's also I don't know, there's a problem of like stratified listening where you would try to approach that record solely on aesthetic terms or solely as a political object. I think that's one of the problems I've found in think pieces.
So we've been talking a lot about reviews. Let's move over a little bit toward think pieces. One thing I want to define or sort of clear up before we totally make that jump is part of the issue being discussed here that the think piece and the review are kind of in this effort to make writing more clickable, more controversial, more shareable, kind of mixing together in this dangerous way. Not a dangerous way, but kind of in a way that's kind of souring both, sides of the fence.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that like I've seen scores aside, like some people feel the need to give scores, Tiny Mixtapes, The Needle Drop, or two websites that do that. And but the more and more I see reviews, I think especially in the past few years, the less and less I see those quantifications. And then one step further, the less and less I've seen even any negative reviews, which I think is emblematic of music writers seeing how kind of pointless a negative review is economically, because ultimately you're trying to push products, you're trying to create controversy, unless it does create a sense of controversy, because negative reviews can do that. But for the most part, they're affirmations of PR. And I've seen more and more of that personally in the past few years. And I think that's kind of indicative of this wanting to make things clickable, wanting to kind of have a certain level of hype consistently coming across. I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, yeah, that is certainly I would say an underlying issue to all of this. I mean, music criticism, music reviewing, music journalism, for a lot of websites has kind of mixed very dangerously with PR, to the point where the legs of music journalism, the biggest legs out there, are just kind of an extension of the PR firms, and we're just kind of being told positive things about the record just because that's good for the sake of the artist, and that's good for the sake of the label that the artist is signed to, and that's good for the sake of the PR company that is promoting the artist that's being reviewed.
It's good for business in general.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly I think I don't know. Would you guys say that's more of a surface level issue, kind of a symptom, or sort of the root to a lot of what's being discussed in this article? Because certainly there is reason to believe that, given the piece does go into a lot of albums, and we'll talk about this next, that did kind of take, in your view, political stances of some sort, to make some kind of social comment, but many of them sort of fell under the radar due to either maybe a lack of PR or sort of a lack of a controversial or an obvious social message.
Yeah, I mean, music criticism and PR are just, they're operating within the same apparatus. Like, it's just different applications. Like, it is, I mean, I guess there is a danger to that. It's like that criticism is content marketing, native advertising in some senses, but has the potential to be more than that when that's just the assumed state of the industry.
It's I don't know. I mean, I agree with that criticism, and I agree with a lot of the criticisms you guys have brought up in this piece. And as much as I would like things to be different, I sort of feel like there are other branches of journalism where it would seem like objectivity is supposed to be not only attainable, but of the utmost importance. And even in those spheres, it seems like the general public doesn't even care about the truth as much as they care about hearing something that's going to reaffirm how they already feel about, I don't know, the war on terror or left-wing issues or right-wing issues, so on and so forth. And if that's the case, if that's like persistently the point of view, what hope does music journalism even have? You know, I guess that's my question. And you know, not necessarily that you guys have an answer, you know, but I feel like the only thing I can do is just try to do my best, understanding that, you know, even my efforts, if I were to try to, you know, sort of point things out or fix anything, it wouldn't necessarily fix anything, and it wouldn't necessarily make people care.
Yeah, I mean, I just realized how cynical I sound. I never really feel like in the service of like a label when I'm writing a review. I mean, I hope I'm like applying at something. I don't know.
You're a cynical piece of shit. Thank you for coming.
Yeah, right. I'm...
Loosen up, guys. Come on.
Yeah, and
okay.
For me, I mean, like, to be totally honest, I enjoy most music in general. I mean, as like kind of, you know, optimistic and not cynical as that might sound, like, I think most music has the potential for someone to feel a certain way about, and positive things. Most music, maybe even 100% of music, is positive to me personally. It's an opinion.
Sure.
But I think that, again, like what you're saying about certain things reaffirming ideologies, that's the problem. I agree. I have a problem with that. And I think that naturally runs against some of the material optimism and potentiality of music and artistic creation in general. And I think think pieces are an exaggerated version of that, where they are specifically trying to pin the piece of art or the piece of music against the wall and define it and speak for it in such a way that I think a review doesn't necessarily do. I think a review is flawed in a way that's similar to the music, whereas a think piece pretends to be a kind of perfect representation of a historical or cultural moment for everybody. So,
okay. To sort of further clear out the cynicism a little bit, I mean, generally, I enjoy a lot of the music that comes across my table, and just because something happens to be marketable doesn't necessarily mean it's bad or that it's awful. I mean, we're sort of in an age where something hip, creative, challenging can in fact be marketable. You know, that wasn't as much the case decades and decades ago, back before the internet was pretty much the primary route for music discovery for a lot of people. And a lot of the music scenes on the internet sort of operate with these niche sort of characteristics where everybody can kind of go solo, do their own thing, not really worry about having to appeal to everybody in order to share their music and get it out there. And when something hip and challenging does end up being marketable and does end up selling a lot of copies, I mean, that's something to celebrate. You know, that's not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, it's let's take this new David Bowie record, for example. I mean, in a lot of respects, it's very strange. It's totally off the wall, and it's like on the front page of iTunes, you know? 10, 15 years ago, an album this challenging, it might not have been the case. I mean, actually, David Bowie did quite a bit of quite a few odd records in the 2000s that, didn't see quite as much attention as his older work, and didn't get quite as much internet buzz. And it seems with this new record, and even prior to the, announcement of his death, it seemed like there was a really warm reception going on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. I think that in the desire section of our piece, we kind of addressed that with the three artists, that being Sophie, Carly Rae Jepsen, and Grimes. And I think Grimes is someone who I happen to really love Art Angels. A lot of people didn't at Tiny Mixtapes. But personally, she's someone who's kind of come from this DIY, like house show scene, and, like very kind of illegible vocals, a Roland synthesizer and a microphone, and ended up making like this incredibly rich, lush pop record that's incredibly marketable. And you saw the industry grow with her artistic identity. And you saw her react to that numerous times throughout her kind of growth as an artist. And then on the other side, you see someone like Carly Rae Jepsen, who is like a pop star. And you see a lot of like underground or experimental communities really digging her Emotion album. I think you're starting to see kind of like the fluidity between things that were once more socialized or more specific to certain markets.
Well, in regards to the Carly mention that ended up in your piece, I think it has to do with like what you said. It seemed like as modern and as new as the record felt, it seemed like she was incorporating a lot of older and tried and true pop sounds and song stylings in her music, which I think made it kind of accessible to an audience that looks for music that has a little bit more depth to it, maybe even a hint of nostalgia to it, not simply something that is the newest, loudest, biggest, most sugary pop song that the major labels can kind of cobble together in the studio.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
And let's also speak to Sophie a little bit, since we're in kind of that section of the piece, and I want to talk about the music that you guys bring up a little bit more. Sophie certainly seems to be in a position where the accessible and the inaccessible, the I don't know, the weird and the bubblegum, the type of music that you would find people dancing to in a club are both kind of embraced at the same time. And you feel like some kind of statement is being made vicariously through this?
I do, definitely. I mean, I think that the fact that it's on a McDonald's commercial and noise heads love it is a testament to its actual quality. I think that the actual, we could talk about social implications of it, like, yeah, it's cheesy, yeah, whatever, like, I'm not necessarily interested in that as much as I'm interested in how amazing it sounds. And I think that a lot of people who try and critique Sophie's music fall short because they try and fit it again in a social framework that's really important to it. It's coming out of a kind of a certain context and a certain kind of like identity driven context, but the material productions that he's created are so actually amazing, in my opinion, that it kind of renders those things moot personally. I don't know what you think, Pat.
Yeah, well, and I mean, one of the main criticisms, like inauthenticity, gets levied against it, which is just as absurd as calling, Carly Rae or Grimes inauthentic, like that they don't understand the conditions into which they're like submitting their creation.
I think that inauthenticity sort of criticism, do you feel like that partially comes from? Do you feel like that comes mostly from the music, or could it also have something to do with kind of the elusivity of PC music and just kind of that whole brand at large? I mean, I know a lot of people sort of seemed steamed over the idea that Sophie would perform live with someone who was kind of dressed in a very feminine manner, and sort of saw that as like an exploitation of femininity in some kind of way.
I mean, I think they're pretty as a collective self-aware of their aesthetic and just playing with like post-internet identity. And I can understand arguments that that's exploitative, as well as I can understand arguments that they're playing in like a productive way with identity.
Yeah.
I don't know. Nick, do you?
Yeah, I feel like, I mean, I think some criticisms about them are more warranted than others. The one criticism I don't have much patience for regarding criticism of Sophie or PC music is one that just calls them cheesy or their sound silly, or people who just don't like it because of the kind of coolness that surrounds it. Again, this is like a big part of the essay itself, is just a reluctance to accept pieces that attempt to just on a purely cultural level define exactly what something is. And I think that comes from like the biggest, music publication that submits this giant think piece. But I also think that's evident in your friend who refuses to step outside of his little or their little bubble regarding their opinions about music. And I think that PC music is something that shows that often because, yeah.
And I don't know, could this off-putting vibe that people have toward some of PC music's output, calling it cheesy, calling it corny, and just leaving it simply at that, could that have something to do with, I don't know, at least to me, and I enjoy this, there's at least a touch of this is a little tongue-in-cheek, or maybe it's a little funny, like we're in on the joke. There's obviously something kind of silly about what we're doing here, but underneath that, there's a lot of skill to what's going on in the production and the sound craft and all of that.
Yeah.
And I think consistently over decades and decades and decades, people have a hard time sort of appreciating at least even an element of comedy in their music.
For sure.
Definitely.
And like, yeah, to me, there's nothing jokey about PC music or Sophie.
Yeah.
They're the most like serious artists to me. Like they're 100% committed to what they do. There's never been a point where they've like changed anything about what they've done, really.
Mm-hmm.
It's been
Sure.
like consistently, we're doing this, and they're doing it really well. And I think that shows like a commitment that I think is culturally misunderstood by some people who are feeling like it's this joke or inauthentic thing or whatever. But
I think it's like really sad if it's like tragic if you have to ironically enjoy PC music, or if there has to be that filter to have fun with it. I mean, you should try dancing with it.
and same thing with Carly Rae. I think
Yeah.
that a lot of people, might have picked up on her music and have been enjoying it through an ironic lens, like, oh wow, this is a pop star. It's cool to like, pop in this way again. Or on the reverse spectrum, like, I hate Grimes, but now I like Grimes because, there's just a bunch of ridiculous like flip-flopping on that level. To me, it's all good. Like all of them.
No, it's absolutely true. I mean, my review of the new Grimes record was way more positive than I thought it was going to be, and pretty consistently I got messages just saying like, what the hell are you talking about? This record's trash. I can't believe you like it. And that came from both people who enjoyed her last record so much and from people who I know personally who have taken kind of a rockist stance on a lot of newer records and, don't see much merit in what people like Grimes are doing. But whatever, I guess that's neither here nor there. Let's get into some of the other music that you guys bring up. You guys bring up 106 Point Never, a record, and you definitely tease some interesting ideas out of sort of the statement being made on the record or what you perceive to be what the album is saying. But, for me personally, a lot of the sounds, if I just kind of take them for what they are, it just seems so abstract that it's not overtly communicating anything to me other than just really stimulating, sounds and creative ideas. Although, I will say that Daniel most definitely seems to very strangely thrive despite making such left field music and not really giving into this trend of just kind of a cult of personality. It just kind of seems like so much of the music that comes out now is very heavily personality driven, and that's just not really his MO.
Yeah, I reviewed Garden of Delete for Tiny Mixtapes and kind of went off the deep end with that review. So you might see a little bit of that here and and this section of the piece specifically talking about his music. But I guess I was in the review and here, I think I'm arguing that specifically with Garden of Delete, he is imploding his art in some way, or denying himself. He spoke a lot about that with the whole Ezra thing and this kind of like damaged quality to his music. And I think here, I guess we did talk about how it was like almost like a sensational effort on his own part to like damage his own kind of artistic quality, which in turn made it even better. It's like the one thing he could do in his own artistic continuum. You know, you see that kind of negative opus in a lot of careers. Like you have, you know, the Yeezus or the Kid A record, which is this like, you know, denial of everything that makes the artist what they are. And Garden of Delete isn't necessarily that, but it is that for One O Tricks Point Never, in my opinion. And however complicated that might be, because the context for One O Tricks Point Never is very complicated aesthetically, I guess.
I mean, it's an album that's certainly explosive, like those other records that you sort of bring up. At least for him, if you're analyzing it within the context of the rest of his discography, it does seem kind of dangerous.
Yeah, and I feel like it does play with. It's the first to play with his cult of personality in some way, like acknowledging his like acclaim or the idea that he is this like avant artist, and like the PR leading up to it, the editor interviews does. I don't know. It toyed a lot.
And
and just the idea that there's this fake band out there that inspired the music.
Yeah, exactly. And I think you know, and we were able to kind of write this piece a few months or 1 month after Garden of Delete came out. So we kind of got to see how the press handled it. And in my opinion, it kind of fell into the trap of this like hyper grunge rock band, you know, like adolescent aesthetic, which in my opinion, like that has nothing to do with the album. Like I think that, you know, those are all kind of like dressing ups on the album. And a lot of the kind of press that surrounded the album involved it being like, you know, this, you know, squealing guitar, smokes and fire, and, you know, like melting skin and all this stuff. But it wasn't necessarily analyzing the album outside of the kind of signifiers that were surrounding it, which I think were set up so that it would effectively kind of create that PR around it.
Well, yeah, for a lot of music writers who tend to sort of be within a few years of how old I am or you are, a lot of the things blatantly referenced musically on the record are kind of nostalgic things. So as a result, I mean, of course, that stuff would, you know, sort of bring up ideas and themes of adolescence to the person listening. Let's talk a little bit about the new James Ferraro record, a record that I personally didn't really care for, but an album that still I do appreciate it for what it seemed like it was trying to say socially. However, it seems like the record didn't really make that big of a splash, and at least the way the piece read to me, it was like you guys kind of saw that as a bit of a tragedy, either that people weren't appreciating the music, or maybe the message was kind of lost on them.
I'm trying to. I feel like it wasn't so much like a political failing of like critics to engage with. Well, no, maybe it was. Like it was such a like aesthetic step from NYC Hell that I think he was seen as like staying in his own niche, and it kept people or critics from really engaging with the statements, like very like localized, like historic engagement with LA and like racialized violence in the US in a way that, you know, people were ready to talk about To Pimp a Butterfly or
One O Tricks Point Never.
Or One O Tricks. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean,
in my opinion, Ferrero I'm a huge Ferrero fan, so Ferrero can do no wrong in my eyes.
Mm.
But I think it's kind of obscurity, and it's general. Yeah, like if critics did say that it didn't deviate enough from NYC Hell, or it's too kind of obtuse for them, or frankly, if they just don't like his voice, or they think that what he's doing is like too kitschy. I mean, he's an artist on his own terms. He's working. He's kind of in his own lane, doing his thing. He's been doing his thing, and you either enjoy it or you don't, or you're willing to kind of step into his world, or you're not. And I guess if you do step into it, there's a lot of brutal commentary and a lot of incisive commentary and a lot of beautiful commentary inside of it. So that's my opinion about the record.
Okay. And I like that, we're sort of bringing these albums up in this context, and it sort of could allow for the listeners to maybe go back and listen to some of these records and give them a bit of a different mental angle to sort of dig up what some of these albums are really trying to say. And again, definitely refer to the piece in light of what Nick and Pat are saying about these albums. But another record that seemed like it fell underneath even more radars was the new Auteur Nouveau record. I mean, I didn't care for the record either, but it seemed like there was just this huge, gap of buzz in between what happened with his last record and what happened with this latest record. And to be perfectly honest, I wasn't a fan of the last record either. So from the standpoint of two guys who have obviously been paying more attention to him than me, what exactly happened this time around that didn't occur last time around, or, vice versa?
Well, it's hard to pinpoint, but I mean, I think a large part of the negative reception was just that he's doing something I think nobody really expected or wanted to hear from him. Age of Transparency is just it's in the same emotional barrier raw mode as Anxiety, but it doesn't really have an angle that's easy to latch onto.
And if there is an angle, it's maybe that one regarding transparency, or this kind of mediated authenticity where it's basically like a meta conversation in a way. And I feel like that might take a level of patience that a lot of people don't have for music. I mean, there's so much music nowadays, and we're used to his sound. I think that the general R&B vocalist thing has become dominant in a way that when Anxiety came out, it wasn't. So people might have just not felt it because of its context in 2015 this time. But I know, Pat, you really love the record. I like it too. But
yeah, I mean, I'm not necessarily trying to get you guys to boil down what's trying to be said on the record. I mean, I think kind of the point that you guys brought up, and I do agree, the album doesn't put forward a really kind of boom smacking you over the head with a really obvious idea or point or statement on something. So as a result, if the listeners have to stick around in order to sort of read into what's being said to sort of understand a really complex issue, a really complex statement, it's not as easy as just kind of getting behind a record that sort of puts out there a very plain and simple black and white us versus them mentality, or, just overly simplified views of oppression or whatever is kind of, sort of the flavor of the day as far as political views go in a lot of these reviews and in a lot of these think pieces that you guys were criticizing earlier in the piece. So as a result of that, is it kind of harder or less interesting or less, I don't know, monetarily solvent for some records like this to be reviewed, since writers can't sort of pigeonhole them and throw them at listeners at such an angle where they're like, hey, this record's making a really cool statement that you're totally going to agree with because you read that think piece that we wrote last week and it says exactly that.
Yeah, exactly. And we made a joke about that, like at the end of the Ferrero section, where you can imagine like a fake headline about Ferrero that's like, imagine James Ferrero, or like meet James Ferrero, the internet artist turning Skid Row into Sonic Fire or something, like it just seems absurd to do that given the kind of damaged quality of that record. And if it was sensationalized, the artist would probably hate it as well, which is another whole issue to bring up. It's whether or not artists even want this to happen to their work in the first place.
I mean, as jokey as that headline is, I mean, that could be a serious headline on another website. And it kind of sounds like you guys should be doing, I don't know, either running a site or doing some PR where, you're just throwing all these political angles at writers and telling them what to write about these records.
Yeah. And, in my opinion, like someone who writes about current music and music that's just coming out, and I'll write a review or we'll, have an interview with an artist and really feel for it. And I can't help but like feel a sense of like general malaise when I see that article come out in a few weeks later or a month later, where it's like, what's happening. That the apparatus is getting its machine rolling, and you see that headline come out about some artist that you're into. And I don't think it's it's not inherently a bad thing. Like I'm not trying to have this like punk rock idea where like, oh, if it gets popular, it's bad. But like, I think we do have to be careful about how, in trying to bring this music to a bigger audience, being careful not to let the qualities that made the work what it was get lost in that transition, I guess. So.
Yeah, it should be stated again. Popular is not bad. It does not necessarily mean bad. It just seems like what you guys are pretty obviously protesting is the idea of trying to make the music popular, trying to give the music buzz off of a bunch of empty political platitudes, using think pieces or using reviews.
Yeah.
It's the sense that a specific like political framework would overwrite like some secret or some like complexity within the art. It's like a damaging way of viewing a work that like sort of limits its own like subjectivity in life and possibilities for a million different experiences.
And also on the side of criticism, it's doing the same thing for the writing that's happening about music, I would say, where you get these cookie cutter articles and headlines that you're reading the same article over and over again, and it's it's just kind of homogenizing in regards to the art and the writing about the art.
Yeah. Well, I think unfortunately, I think a lot of websites sort of overread one another, or maybe just overread the press release that's handed to them along with the artist. So as a result, you do kind of see a lot of those same phrases popping up again and again and again and again in reviews. I mean, I know personally I try to avoid any and all reviews when I'm writing a review. So I'm not sure how much of, sort of what I'm saying might be the same exact thing as what other people are saying as well on a lot of these review sites. But the thing is also we're kind of all living and thriving in the same context, in this music writer world, and viewing these albums through as specific as we would like to think our experiences are. We're still kind of viewing these albums through a very similar lens, since we've got to crunch out these reviews in a certain amount of time, and it's got to be consumable for an audience. And there's certain phrases and ways of writing and communicating that are the most effective that we all kind of stick to. So as a result, I think there are some similarities that are obviously going to pop up in the writing about some of these records.
Yeah, and I think that's okay. I don't think it'd be definitely okay if everyone was trying their hardest to write about the music and everyone's reviews ended up the same because they tried so hard to write about it and they got all the ideas really right. Like, that would be amazing. I think it's the kind of competitive idea that has even led itself to this think piece culture. The fact that you do have to differentiate yourself from other publications, and this kind of competitive environment where everyone's like, your review has to be written way different, has kind of led to just the optimization of that entire situation, where people stop doing that and instead do the most efficient thing, you know?
All right. Let's finish up by sort of getting into this section of the piece where you guys essentially say the battle is over. While certainly, you guys do acknowledge music criticism. I mean, certainly, like you said at the beginning of the piece, it's hopeless, but it's still necessary. It's still going to be around, even if we were to take some kind of violent action and completely obliterate any and all music press. There would still be opinions, and because those opinions can be launched over social media and people tend to congregate toward opinions that they like on social media, I mean, those individuals are going to end up having followings just like any music site used to have a following, prior to their obliteration. So, there's still going to be opinions, there's still going to be points of view, and there's still going to be people congregating around these points of view. So even though music criticism is necessary and it's going to be around whether we do something about it or not, is the future of it kind of dismal in your point of view?
I like the sort of democratization of music criticism you just imagined. Like, I'm thinking of like a tweet with like the most
older music critics would argue, that it already has been democratized heavily. I mean, certainly it's not, in that position of perfect democratization, but part of the reason a lot of music critics who came up in the 80s and 90s don't have careers anymore is that it's been democratized to the point where their services are no longer, sort of needed. So I mean, we are talking about at least some democratization, I guess is my point. But you're talking about democratization in even more extreme sense.
Yeah, and I guess like the machines or the press apparatus has moved to understanding that democratization, where you could pay whoever to write whatever and it will work. As
content.
Simple. Yeah, it's like, like just basic content marketing stuff. And I guess the think pieces that we're talking about are the kind of content marketing that contains a certain political feeling, and it's like in that last section, we do try and not rob it of its potential meaning. Like, we're not just trying to say all think pieces are bad. I think Pat mentioned in that last section that there is a hopefulness in politicized music writing, and it does kind of allow for conversations to take place, and kind of positive arguing and differences of opinion to get fleshed out on social media and blah, blah, blah. But I guess it's the potential replacement of that type of writing and that type of thinking with the actual tools for carrying out a real political optimism with the mere feeling of that political situation. I don't know if you want to talk about that more.
Yeah, I mean, it just, I think, think pieces are endlessly important, like to give a platform to oppositional voices, minoritized voices, like marginalized writing. But so often the engagement or like the sharing and everything is just almost exploitative in the sense that it's the feeling of like being engaged or active without any sort of real mobilization happening.
Yeah, I mean, it seemed like the way that you guys had ended it, and I think we'll kind of close up here, and tell me if I'm wrong, but it seemed like political speech in music writing, given music writing is so indebted to culture is going to happen, and it's necessary. But the thing is that it's important for the quality of that speech and those points of view to be good, level-headed, and objective, and not be informed by this idea that we need to throw these empty political buzzwords and sort of this point of view into the piece because it's going to be more controversial.
Yeah. I'm trying to,
Yeah, and
I'm searching.
And those, I think you're right. That danger is not in the think piece. It's in the kind of baiting of culture and the controversial words that are thrown into it, and the kind of like self-pleasing quality that happens when something is sensationalized to the point of, and that's the subtitle of the piece is listening for identity in a sensational vacuum. And just kind of like the relentless sensational political atmosphere that you feel when you're scrolling through anything, and to actually hear an artist's identity in that kind of noise, and if you can hear it at all.
All right, I want to thank you guys for coming on and talking with me about the piece. Again, I'm going to link this piece down there in the description so you guys can read it yourselves. And I just appreciate you guys having a conversation all about this stuff and what you wrote.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having us.